So, Chapter 8 of Two Blue Vortex has officially been out for a whole day, which means it's time to break down and analyze the heat that was just dropped on us this month. Now, while we've already done our video breaking down what exactly happened in the chapter and talking about some possible theories that could spin out of the chapter, and while we made our video talking about the possibility of Himawari being a 10-tails Jinchuriki, a lot more happened in this chapter than just that. In fact, there was a lot of minor plot points that happened in Chapter 8 that could have great importance. And I'm not talking about Mitsuki low-key having game in his conversation with Ada, though that was impressive. No, the moment we're going to be talking about today happened at the exact moment that Jura and Hidari entered Konoha. Or I should say, at the exact moment that Jura and Hidari came into contact with Konoha's sensory bubble. Now, for those of you who don't know what Konoha's sensory bubble is, it's a bubble around Konoha, maintained by the sensory unit. I know, crazy high-level stuff here, but the sensory unit in Konoha is a unit comprised of the greatest sensors in Konoha, most of which are Yamanaka, and it's led by Ino, who's useful now. And actually, she's a lot more than just useful. She's one of the most useful people in Konoha, as her sensory abilities, now that Naruto and Sasuke are gone, are probably not only the greatest in Konoha, but maybe the greatest on Earth, as she recently established in Chapter 8 that she would be able to facilitate a mind-to-mind conversation between two people over a distance of at least 100 kilometers, which means that 100 kilometers is the upper range of her sensory limit, which is crazy. That's like mind's eye of the Kagura level sensory range. And that level of sense when it comes to a ninja has only been touched by people like Madara, Tobirama, Sasuke, and Naruto, all of whom were able to sense ninja from literal countries away. But still, very impressive for Ino. And the purpose of this bubble that Ino maintains over Konoha is to cover the entirety of Konoha, both on the ground and in the sky, making it impossible for anybody to enter Konoha without coming into contact with this bubble, unless you dug in. I don't know if it goes below the ground. But why do we want anybody who's trying to enter Konoha coming into contact with this bubble? Well, because the second that anybody comes into contact with this bubble, it immediately detects their chakra signature. And since chakra signatures in the Naruto universe are as unique to a person as your fingerprints, the second that an individual's chakra signature comes into contact with the bubble, the sensory unit in Konoha is immediately able to detect who's coming into Konoha and who's leaving. And thus the sensory unit is able to know in real time if the person coming into Konoha is screened and is safe to enter Konoha, or is an unknown entity, or an established dangerous entity. That is to say that the sensory bubble around Konoha kind of works like facial recognition in a world where masks and sunglasses don't exist. So Konoha can, with 100% certainty, know who is coming in and out of their village and whether or not they've been screened to come in and out of their village immediately. And this bubble was made in response to some not so great happenings that happened in Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, like Orochimaru being able to kill the fourth Kazekage and use transformation technique on himself to pretend to be the fourth Kazekage for a couple of days and then launch a coup from inside of Konoha as Orochimaru. But this isn't even the only circumstance in which people were able to simply waltz into Konoha, as both Itachi and Kisame were also able to waltz into Konoha and just kind of snag a child, and a very important child at that, the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, Kurama. All of these moments could have easily been avoided if the bubble was instituted in Naruto, but it wasn't. But this doesn't mean that the bubble is a surefire way to protect Konoha, because the bubble only alerts the sensory unit, who can alert the Hokage, who can alert the entire populace of Konoha that danger is imminent. It can't do anything to stop the danger. People can still come in and out of Konoha freely, it's just now we know who is coming in and out. Which is why when the dangerous chakra signatures of Hidari and Jura hit the bubble and the sensory unit was alerted of their presence in Konoha, 5 soon-to-be Christmas ornaments showed up at that exact location. And no-name wall-protecting ninjas would have shown up anywhere that Jura and Hidari tried to enter into Konoha from. It's not just the front gate, but Jura and Hidari understood that nobody in Konoha would be able to stop them, so they might as well use the front gate. But the truly interesting part of this moment, when Jura and Hidari decided to cross the boundary into Konoha, wasn't 5 men getting split down the middle like a freshman cheerleader trying to impress the UCLA basketball team. No. What was interesting is that Jura's chakra signature came back negative when both Jigen and Ishiki have been to Konoha, meaning that in Chapter 8, in possibly one of the sneakiest ways imaginable, Kishimoto could have revealed to us that Jura is in fact not Jigen, and is therefore some other beast entirely. In fact, this very moment could confirm a theory I was talking about months ago, when Jura and the rest of the Shinju were revealed, and everybody was scrambling to try and figure out what their identities were. And in that moment, I hypothesized that Jura was not the rebirth of somebody like Jigen or Ishiki, but instead a manifestation of the Ten Tails, which would make Jura a brand new and much more terrifying monster than any of the other Shinju. Which is why today we're going to explore what the possibility of Jura's chakra signature coming up negative could mean for the future of Boruto. But before we do that, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I got hot. And if you like watching me get hot while filming anime videos, then you're gonna love my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime and manga. And if you like watching me get really hot while talking about anime and manga, then you're gonna love my podcast, Talk is Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Or if you just wanna look hot this summer, guys, go ahead and meander on over into my merch store, talkisanonymous.net, where you can pick up some of the greatest anime t-shirts, sweatshirts, and sticker packs known to man. But before we get into all that, guys, today we're going to talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, Factor. Factor wants to help you skip the stress of meal prep this holiday season, as Factor allows you to choose from 35 fresh, healthy, and delicious, never frozen meals every single week, all delivered directly to your door and ready to eat in 2 minutes. See, Factor understands that the holiday season is a bit tough on your body goals, and thus Factor is happy to offer a myriad of calorie-conscious options, with delicious dietitian-approved calorie-smart meals that all clock in at 550 calories or less. See, Factor is a lifesaver to me, because I put out a lot of content, so I don't have time to spend an hour cooking up lunch, which is why I keep my fridge stocked with Factor, so I can head downstairs, open a meal, microwave it for 2 minutes, and be set, ready, and fueled correctly. But there's a big difference between telling and showing. So let's head down to the kitchen and show you just how easy and delicious Factor truly is. Today we're cooking up roasted veggie and pesto tortellini. I love a healthy and hearty Italian meal.
And look at how easy this is. All I have to do is remove that film, poke a couple of holes in this foil here, toss in the microwave, hit 2, and I'll see you in 120 seconds. And look at how good that looks. But let's see how good it tastes.
The pesto flavoring is perfect, and the pasta is somehow still perfectly al dente.
So what are you guys waiting for? Head to factor75.com or use the link below and enter code NCHammer2350 for 50% off your first order today. And on top of that 50% off your first box today, you'll also get free wellness shots for life. Yes, that's right. You'll get 2 free wellness shots out of 3 available flavors every single week you order with Factor for free for life. Let's save time and save taste. So when it really comes down to it, there's 3 possible explanations that would explain why Jura's chakra signature came up negative to the sensory bubble. And today we're going to be talking about all 3 of those possibilities, starting with the one I believe to be the least likely and slowly but surely making our way to the one that I believe to be the most likely. You get it. You've seen this type of video before. And the first possibility, which albeit isn't insane, it's just so boring I don't think a competent writer like Kishimoto would ever decide to do this, is that Jura is in fact not derived from Jigen or Ishiki, but instead he is the Shinju of somebody who's never been to Konoha before. This is why Hidari's chakra signature would come up as Sasuke, clearly proving that the Shinju have the chakra signature of the person that their claw grime bit, and yet why Jura's chakra signature would come up negative, as whoever Jura is the Shinju of has never been to Konoha and therefore never had their chakra signature registered. But that brings up the question, okay, well then who's never been to Konoha? And more importantly, of this list of people who have never been to Konoha, who have we not seen running around? Because if they were bit by a claw grime and are currently chilling in a half-made divine tree somewhere, they can't exactly be a part of the story outside of being a Shinju. And honestly, that list is not only incredibly short, but also everybody on it is dead. Because really, the only people who are even remotely relevant to Boruto's story that never made it within Konoha's boundaries are members of Kara, be it lesser inners or some of the outers, which means this list of semi-relevant characters who never made it to Konoha is basically just Boro, Victor, and Garo, all of whom are very dead. But then again, so are Jigen / Ishiki, so maybe we shouldn't rule them out just on account of the fact that they're not currently breathing. So, while this could be a possibility, the idea that Jura is the Shinju of any of these characters, to me, seems highly unlikely, because while it would technically make sense within the capacity of the story that Kishimoto's already laid out, the payoff on that would be god-awful. That would be like if Toby was revealed to be Mizuki. Some of you are probably asking, Nick, who's Mizuki? Exactly. So let's just ignore that possibility in its entirety and move on to our second possibility, which I like a whole lot more because it's actually something we talked about on this page months ago, and I love being right. Now, we talked about this possibility months ago because I was trying to figure out the identities of all of the Shinju, that is to say, who their claw grimes bit. And while the identity of Bug, Moegi, and Sasuke was rather obvious, we didn't have a whole lot of hints for Jura. And thus, in that video, I speculated, because right before Jura appears, the Ten Tails disappears, Jura must somehow be the awakening of the emaciated juvenile Ten Tails that was pinned to the ground outside of the Kara hideout using chakra rods by Code. And this theory made and still makes a fair amount of sense, because as we know, from Boruto, Code has been experimenting with the Ten Tails, and therefore, by extension, the Claw Grimes. And these augmentations that Code made to the Ten Tails or the Claw Grimes allowed for not only the creation of superior Claw Grimes with Rinnegan, but also allowed for these very same Claw Grimes to create a Shinju from the person that they bit. And now, would it make more sense to you to assume that Code personally augmented every single claw grime he had to either make them superior or to give them this ability to create Shinju? Or would it make more sense that he augmented the material he was making these claw grimes with in order to confer those same results? And by the way, I'm aware that the claw grime's ability to make Shinju by biting people was non-intentional by Code, but it did happen because of the augmentations that Code was possibly making to his source material, the Ten Tails. And therefore, if you consider the possibility of Code personally augmenting hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of claw grimes versus augmenting just one Ten Tails, it seems much more likely to me that he was doing his experimentations on the juvenile Ten Tails. But if you assume that Code was in fact doing his experimentations on the Ten Tails, the follow-up question is, okay, well then why didn't the Ten Tails transform like any of the other claw grimes? If it was augmented and was the source material for the claw grimes that would eventually be able to create Shinju, then why didn't it turn into Jura as soon as the augmentations were complete? And the answer to that is rather simply, the chakra rods. See, we know that chakra rods, used by the likes of Nagato, Obito, Madara, and Jigen/Ishiki, have the ability to either transmit chakra or disrupt its flow. And I believe in the case of the juvenile Ten Tails, who was pinned to the ground with said chakra rods, the purpose of those chakra rods was to disrupt its chakra's flow. And this is why, when it was rescued, presumably by one of the other Shinju, Kishimoto dedicated a panel to the chakra rods floating in the air and then clanging off the ground, very clearly and possibly intentionally showing us that the chakra rods are no longer in the Ten Tails. And what do we always say on this channel, ladies and gentlemen? Kishimoto never does anything for nothing. And thus, the moment those chakra rods were pulled out of the Ten Tails, that is, the moment the Ten Tails was rescued, it was able to undergo all the genetic and chakra augmentations that were done to it by Code over the years. And thus, in that exact moment, it became Jura. And this is why Jura is the leader of the Shinju, as he is truly the material that all the other Shinju were created from, their true master. He is the Ten Tails that made them. And that's why the other Shinju felt compelled to save the Ten Tails, because in a sense, it's their creator. And this is doubly impressive when you consider the fact that the Shinju did this when they had even less of an ego than they currently have. The Shinju, in the moment they saved the Ten Tails, were hardly more conscious or intelligent than your average claw grime. And yet, the first thing that any of them ever did together was saving the Ten Tails. This also explains where the Ten Tails went, because the second the Ten Tails is swept away, it's seemingly gone forever. And in its place is Jura, descending down from the sky. And I don't know if you guys know anything about Ten Tails, but according to Naruto, they are pure masses of nature energy with no emotions, ego, or consciousness. And thus, even if the Shinju dropped off the Ten Tails like a mile from where they were going to fight Boruto, it would still be making a ruckus. The Otsutsuki literally used them to terraform planets. Not to mention the idea that Jura is the reincarnation or the second form of the juvenile emaciated Ten Tails is backed up in Chapter 8 outside of the moment when Jura hits the chakra sensory bubble. Because in Chapter 8, Jura states that he's able to sense Naruto's Bijou chakra because he himself is a fellow incarnation of a bijou. Now, obviously, this statement could still apply to him if he was a traditional Shinju, but the Shinju in the official translation are usually referred to as divine trees, not bijou. And while technically those are the same thing, the wording here feels intentional. On top of that, Hidari isn't sensing Naruto's bijou chakra. And if hypothetically Hidari and Jura were made through the same means, that is, somebody being bitten by a claw grime and then turning into a Shinju, shouldn't Hidari be as much of a manifestation of a tailed beast as Jura? And yet, in Chapter 8, it seems fairly apparent, and maybe this is done intentionally, that Hidari has no idea where Naruto is. In fact, when Jura wanders into an antique bookstore, Hidari follows him and says, "Naruto, are you here?" And that was so ridiculous to Jura, he laughed at it. So if Hidari and Jura are assumed to be the same, the difference in their ability to sense bijou chakra is slightly curious, which leads me to believe that somehow Jura is more of an incarnation of a bijou than Hidari, i.e., Jura is the Ten Tails. But if Jura is the Ten Tails, then how does he have memories? Why does he know Kawaki? Why does he want to consume Naruto? Well, the juvenile Ten Tails, while technically a ball of nature chakra with no ego, would maybe know Kawaki, as Kawaki was born and raised in the Kara hideout with Jigen, and at that very same Kara hideout was the juvenile Ten Tails, and therefore there's a possibility that the juvenile Ten Tails would be able to see and possibly register Kawaki. This isn't an impossibility, since things that we humans deem to not have consciousness also have the ability to have memories. But this doesn't answer the question of why Jura would want Naruto. And the answer to that question could really go one of two ways. Either we could run with the current theory that we posted a couple of days ago that stated that all of the tailed beasts during the 4th Great Shinobi World War decided to give Naruto a piece of their chakra, making him a pseudo Ten Tails Jinchuriki, which is backed up by the fact that since the 4th Great Shinobi World War, Naruto has been able to use all the Kekkei Genkai of the tailed beasts, and it's shown in Boruto that Naruto was still able to act as a meeting place for all of the tailed beasts to come together and talk, which could feasibly only really be done if he was holding on to a piece of every single one of their chakra. And pretty much everything we've seen in both Naruto and Boruto confirms that this is at least partially true. Now, the reason we were talking about all of that is because this pseudo Ten Tails Jinchuriki chakra might have been passed down to Himawari, but if you're curious about that theory, go and watch that video. But if Naruto is truly a pseudo Ten Tails Jinchuriki, that would, in a sense, make him the manifestation of a separate Ten Tails. And therefore, the juvenile Ten Tails, that is now Jura, could feel a natural pull towards Naruto, which is why Jura would want to consume Naruto, possibly to get his Ten Tails chakra, as not only was the Ten Tails that was hypothetically turned into Jura incredibly emaciated before it turned into Jura, as Code was taking slices off of it like it was a Thanksgiving turkey to make an army of claw grimes, but it was also repeatedly referred to as a juvenile Ten Tails. So possibly by consuming the chakra of another Ten Tails, that juvenile emaciated Ten Tails will be able to reach its full potential, and thus Jura would become infinitely more strong. The second explanation is that Jura is Jigen, but only in personality and not in chakra signature. And if you're going with the explanation to today's video that Jura is in fact the awakening of the emaciated juvenile Ten Tails, this is probably the best possible explanation to explain why Jura wants to eat Naruto, and basically all other questions revolving around this topic. Because here's the thing, we know that Jigen was siphoning off chakra from the Ten Tails prior to his battle against Naruto and Sasuke, and we know this probably wasn't the first time that Jigen did this, as Ishiki was able to keep his vessel Jigen alive for over 2,000 years, even when they were incompatible, and he was most likely able to do this through the assistance of the chakra from the juvenile Ten Tails. But here's the thing about chakra in the Naruto world. All chakra is connected, and that's been a big take-home message for Naruto, specifically when we were talking about Baryon, which, mind you, was tied into Ishiki's storyline. Thus, Jigen, siphoning chakra from the Ten Tails for possibly thousands of years, could have left a part of Jigen inside of the Ten Tails. And since Ten Tails don't have egos, as we previously covered, when the Ten Tails underwent its transformation because of the augmentations done to it by Code, it used the small amount of ego it had within itself to create a personality. And that small amount of ego belonged to Jigen. And that would answer pretty much every single question we have about Jura. So if this is such a good answer, why is it second out of 3 possibilities, with the third possibility being the most likely? Well, 1, because I like to give you options, and 2, because the third possibility is probably more likely than this. Because while this does answer all the questions we have about Jura, it is still kind of a long shot that requires a lot of downstream explanation. See, because the real probable answer as to why Jura's chakra signature came up negative when he hit the sensory bubble is because when Jigen came to Konoha, he didn't fly in. He teleported in through Kawaki's Kama, meaning the bubble that wraps around the exterior of Konoha's limits never would have come into contact with Jigen's chakra signature. And not only did he teleport in, he also teleported out, and that was the one and only time Jigen was ever in Konoha. Because after that, he fights against Naruto and Sasuke, wins, retreats, and then gets kind of killed by Kashin Koji. All of which happens in the Kara dimension or the Kara hideout. On top of this, let's not forget the Otsutsuki have the ability to completely erase their chakra signature, and thus this rule also applies to those who wield karma markings. Meaning that if Jigen and Ishiki were to fly through the sensory bubble, they probably wouldn't leave a trace. And knowing that is important because Ishiki does fly into Konoha. So technically, if he was a regular person flying into Konoha, they would have registered his chakra signature and probably put it into the database. And since we know they keep dead people's chakra signatures in the database for some reason, because Kashin Koji was able to freely enter and leave Konoha because his chakra signature belongs to Jiraiya, if Ishiki had flown through the barrier and left a trace of his chakra signature, it would still probably be in the database today. But this doesn't necessarily mean that Ishiki was erasing his chakra presence when entering Konoha. As we all know, Ishiki made a pretty obvious entry into Konoha, flying in and taking out the rest of the Konoha 13 not named Naruto and Sasuke, because Ishiki didn't think anybody in Konoha would be able to stop him. So the idea of him erasing his chakra signature to sneak into Konoha wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when you consider the fact that he probably didn't know about the sensory bubble in the first place. But this brings us to the point that Ishiki's chakra signature is probably logged in the database. So why did Jura's chakra signature come up negative? Well, because Jigen's isn't. See, it's more than likely that Jigen and Ishiki have different chakra signatures. At least so different that they wouldn't come up as the same entity when going through the sensory bubble. I mean, think about it. Jigen and Ishiki's relationship is no different from Kawaki and Ishiki's, or Boruto and Momoshiki's, all of whom have different chakra signatures from each other. And thus there's no real reason for us to assume that Jigen and Ishiki's relationship was any different. Not to mention the fact that Jigen teleported into Konoha and out of Konoha backs up the theory that Jura is Jigen, which is definitely the most popular answer for his hidden identity, pretty hard, because Jigen technically shouldn't have his chakra signature registered by the sensory unit, which would explain why Jura's comes up negative. So really, when it comes down to it, answer 2 and answer 3 are kind of the same thing, though answer 2 assumes that Jura only has the personality of Jigen and not the chakra, while answer 3 simply states that the sensory unit was never able to track Jigen's chakra signature. But out of all of these answers, what do you guys believe is the most likely? Or do you believe there's a separate answer that I didn't talk about that's more likely than any of these 3? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I don't think I ever want to say the words chakra signature ever again.